So this is the report mainly from work package 3, which was about, as we all know, implementing a series of pilots across the 9 participating countries and evaluating them. And we worked with university teams as evaluators and the pilot teams as implementers, and it was very much a partnership, co-working. So the point of this is to share some insights from the pilots. There's a huge amount of material, so we're going to really flag up some highlights and try and draw some lessons together, which we hope people will comment on and help us to develop further. So that there are 4 contributors, of which 3 of us are speaking this morning, myself, Andrea and Giulia. Okay, so we asked all the pilots to report to us on the pilot impact, and there's a series of questions that we asked them. We want this morning to concentrate on the 3 questions that are bolded there. So to what extent were innovation processes opened up to a broader range of people, and Giulia will talk to that. In what ways and to what extent was the reach of ICTs extended? Andrea will talk to that. And what were the outcomes for various actors, contributors and beneficiaries? And I will briefly talk to that now. And I'll hand over to Andrea and finally to Giulia. Okay, so outcomes for the actors and beneficiaries. We have a huge amount of evidence from across 10 pilots. What we did was break it down into the levels of micro, as in individual participants and the people who are intended to benefit from services and their immediate support networks and so on. Meso, referring to the organizational level, but also to inter-organizational, because that's particularly important in co-creation, and in some of the pilots also at the level of communities. Some of them were very much focused around supporting and empowering communities as well as individuals. So just to really dip in and illustrate from a very large amount of data, which we don't have time to explain it in detail, but I've just flagged up on the left-hand side of that slide from the Hungarian pilot, based on survey work with 74 participating households. The things people reported that had changed for them in their personal lives. More than half open to new things more than before, and as you can see on the slide, other perceived changes at an individual level. I've also flagged up a few quotes there, so these are just snippets from much longer pieces of data. Some of them are research interviews that the pilot teams have undertaken, some from interactive workshop groups and so on, and some from community reporting. And it's really important that we put together all those sources of evidence, which do different things, but build up the picture of the achievements and reach of the pilots. So the Spanish one there, Co-Create has been a real before and after, and that's part of a really long narrative about how, by engaging in the entrepreneurial co-working space, the person had grown and developed personally. The quote from the Estonian community member is about creating a safe atmosphere where job roles and societal statuses are not highlighted. So this sense of empowerment, and we have across all the pilots quite strong qualitative narrative evidence that people perceived a personal empowerment that we talked in Hayes' presentation on Monday about power, and while shifting power is slow and enormous task. There definitely is evidence of at least a perception of some kinds of shift towards empowering and legitimating people who typically have things done to them rather than being asked to participate. And a similar quote there from the Finnish young person who felt that you know, being able to influence surrounding society in something they wouldn't have imagined prior to being involved. The next slide, it sums up a lot of material at the Meso level. We were challenged in the first review very much to talk more about organisational change. And in some of the pilots, there definitely is evidence that that's occurred within organisations. The Swedish pilot is a particularly good example of that, that awareness of frontline and middle managers changing. And there's a section in the positioning paper which expands on that quite nicely for reference. And in Finland also, there's a clear perception that organisational change was taking place in the youth sector, and that attitudes on the front line were changing. I think, although we have talked about organisational change and that's important, what's even more important in a co-creational context is inter-organisational, interagency, and sometimes cross-sector change. And there's a couple of highlights in the bullet points there from the pilots in Italy and Estonia about that, building relationships of trust, new innovative connections, an increase in social capital, and there is some of the pilots have evidenced that through the work they've done. The quote at the bottom refers to the Hungarian pilot, where the change was in local leaders, and in some countries more than others, the shift was from a high to a low base. So in Sweden, co-creation is very well understood, and a lot has been done prior to the CoSIE project. In Hungary, it was the other extreme. It was really novel, and at the start, I think I'm right in saying our Hungarian colleagues will perhaps confirm that, but it was just seen as it's just too difficult, that so different from the way things were done in that country, that you know, the rural poor people wouldn't respond to it, but the evidence is that they did. Right, this is my final slide because I want to leave a lot of time for other people to talk, but it's a constant criticism of projects that things, you know, stop at piloting, prototyping, you know, they do really good, interesting stuff, and then it doesn't stick for all sorts of reasons, because attention shifts and funding runs out and so on. And I think what we can demonstrate across CoSIE, and this is going a little bit beyond the work of Work Package 3, but it's important for us to flag up, is that there are very visible achievements, evidence of recognition, national prizes and awards and visits from high status officials and those kinds of things. And you know, just to flag up a few things that have happened which show that the at least some aspects of the pilot are becoming institutionalized and potentially have a life well beyond the lifetime of the project. So the social hackathons in Estonia mainstreamed in the Virima County and becoming an official part of the development strategy. And there's also seems to be a national replication and recognition of the achievements of that pilot. In Hungary, a new program for poor households has included co-creation as something that applicants can stress and gain extra credit for. In Finland, the Finnish team report that the city of Helsinki has bought one of the products of the hackathons, the encountering training that was developed originally in the hackathon and then further improved with the university and an NGO partner, and that has won a national award and a grant to further sustain and upscale it. And final example I put there is Spain, where the Co-Create projects has become included in the budget for another year. And I've finally flagged up, I don't have time to talk about, perhaps Michael would like to, the Co-Crea-Te, the manifesto produced by the participants in the workspace, which seems to be a really powerful and inspiring model of things that people have come together to produce. Okay, that's the end of my slides. Can I hand over now, please, to Andrea, who I think is going to talk about the ICT aspects of the project.
Okay, do you hear me now?
I hear you.
Yes, good. As you know, the topic of ICT and open data, it is a very tough one. And both the reviewers and our project officer, they did criticize the way in which we reported on that. But looking deeply at the pilot, the situation is less dark, in my opinion. There are shadows and light, but actually many pilots use somehow ICT tools, and the situation is even more positive concerning open data. So what we can say that the pilot showed a variegate utilization and uneven utilization of ICT tools in the co-creation process. One pilot, the Italian one, is specifically dedicated to design and implement a digital solution, but innovative adoption are also used significant in Spain, Finland, and Estonia. I will give you some example for. This is the Italian app called Benessere Bambini, which means children.
Yes? Andrea, we are still sharing Sue's screen, so can you please?
Oh, sorry. So I have to redid it. Now?
Okay. Now it's okay. Just use
the
presentation mode, please.
Presentation mode. Presentation mode, please.
Yes, then I have some difficulties in move from one slide to another in presentation mode, but I will try. Okay, so this is the Italian pilot, the app, and you see here the logo, and here you see in a typical screen of a smartphone. Then we have the Spanish pilot, and they use the Slack platform, which is a communication tool for the Co-Crea-Te community. And this is a screenshot, and they have more than 300 participants. Another very interesting example of utilization of ICT tools is the Finnish pilot, where they developed a tool called Luuppi, which is a tool to analyze social media posts. And they downloaded 78,000 posts, and then they analyze them. But what is even more interesting, it is that they use example of this post also as a trigger in their workshops to professional, and several participants found them very interesting. So what I did, I tried to create a table, a synthesis, showing the level of utilization of IC tools in our co-creation process. And I did a three score scale, low, medium, and high. So as you can see, and I divided the pilot by the wave. So in the first wave, we have Italy with a high utilization of ICT, Sweden medium, and UK low. In the second wave, we have Spain with a high utilization of ICT, Estonia in medium, and Hungary low. In the third wave, we have Finland with a high utilization, Netherlands one with a low utilization, and it must be said that so far, myself and Sue, we did not receive still the report from the second Netherlands project and from the Polish project, so we don't have data to be put it in this table. As I told you concerning the open data, the situation is much better. It must be recognized that open data were used much more than ICT tools among our pilots. But they have been used in different phases of the co-creation cycle. The open data result to be very successful and very useful in the needs assessment phase. Almost all the pilot declare that they use some form of open data in the needs assessment phase and some other in the planning phase. Only few pilots, it must be said, utilize open data in the implementation phase. The example is the Italian pilot where open data are embedded in the app. So the app, it is self-updating and the app will take the data directly from database of the municipalities and the local health authority. The open data that has been used in the CoSIE pilot, in the CoSIE project, came from different sources, from public agency, such as National Statistic Institute in the Estonian case, public authorities, such as a municipality in the Spanish case, and health authority in the Italian case, but also non-profit civil society institutions, such as the National Association of People with Disabilities in Sweden. So finally, I did more or less the same exercise concerning open data. And as you see, we have less project in the low column, and we have more project in the medium and high level column. So I think we can share this table with our reviewer and with our project officer in order to show how open data has been used and implemented in our 9 pilots. Thank you. I will give the floor to Giulia, that she has her slides.
Yes, thank you, Andrea. Good morning to everyone. Now I will try to use the presentation mode. Okay, yeah, you should see them now. Okay, good morning, everyone. First of all, I bring you Riccardo's greetings. He's sorry not to be here, but he's giving a class right now, so I'm here. Riccardo and I focused in particular on the section B of pilot's impact reports, and we identified 3 dimensions which are more relevant according to us. And for each dimension, we underline some aspects emerging from the pilots and subsequent questions or reflections. These dimensions are the degree of heterogeneity among actors involved in the pilot. So we didn't focus only on beneficiaries, but on the whole group of stakeholders. The second dimension is the organization of this heterogeneity, so the forms of governance that it took along the process. And the third dimension is the future perspectives of these forms of organization. I think that for the moment I will skip the first dimension since the time is tight. Then if we have time, I will go back later on, or anyway, we have the slides, so they will be useful to reflect also in the following days. So I will start from the second dimension, the organization of heterogeneity. And within this dimension, we already acknowledged how each pilot used efficient methods during the process in order to coordinate the work of the group, involving indeed different types of actors. So we saw hackathon focus groups, workshops, community reporting, living labs, working tables. Using these methods, many of you realize that face-to-face relationships and activities have greater impact than virtual interactions. But three other important elements emerging from the pilots are that beneficiary representatives and counselors are fundamental to explain the point of view of beneficiaries and to mediate between them and other stakeholders. Then a steering actor acting as facilitator of the process seems to be really important to keep the group working and unified. And finally, setting a third place, a such of intermediary place, really fosters the meetings and the conversation of actors who otherwise wouldn't have the possibility to meet, to communicate, to negotiate, and to collaborate. So we think that for deepening the reflection, we need to focus more and to reflect more on how all these have been organized. Some answers to these questions are already present in the impact report, some others not. For example, we need to answer to questions such as how did the pilot organize the task divisions among its members? What characteristics or actions need to develop the steering actor? How did each stakeholder participate in each phase, and how was its participation concretely, if it was active and proponing actions. So all of this is really important to address the issue of the governance of co-creation processes. Coming to the last dimension, with regard to the future, for sure, the period we are all living is creating some obstacles for the development of pilots, especially those who are in the phase of implementation. And beside this, even if it's true what Sue said about the shift in of approach within service providers and in the mentality of some public professionals, that in other pilots there are still quite strong cultural barriers between public administration, public professional and civil society, and for-profit enterprises on the other side, or still within the public administrations among public professionals. The good news coming from the pilots is that some, as I said, some of you perceived a real shift of approach within service providers and the continuation of collaboration among stakeholders, such as working groups or the consulting committee in Italy. And the third positive, very positive point is that's the collected material, especially in the need assessment phase, is becoming really useful and interesting also in other situations, in other services, or in the beginning of other projects. So we gathered some of the opportunities that you underlined in the impact reports, and we added some others. It might be useful to share knowledge and a theoretical framework about co-creation to help the diffusion of common language and values among the participants. I mean, when developing each co-creation project, it's useful in the beginning to share this theoretical framework. Something to remember, moreover, is that spreading co-creation does not mean only translating and using it in other cities or countries, but also translating its use among other policies and service sectors. And then I have some questions, such as, would you think it might be useful to introduce new professional roles, such as the welfare community managers, but there are many other roles with other names to think about, in order to facilitate the development of co-creation processes and to mediate and to help the negotiation, the collaboration among stakeholders. Concerning the difficulties to work with some public professionals, instead, would it be useful to foster the implementation of public regulations or public manifestos at municipal or regional level, and maybe are also arranging training courses for public professionals about welfare and governance innovations? The last two bullets concern eventually the importance of impact evaluation, not only for our pilots, because it's more and more important to assess the social and cultural value of these projects, but also for enterprises. Since for-profit enterprises is another actor which presents some cultural barriers and prevent them to take part in these projects, it's useful to keep in mind how important it's becoming for them to evaluate and demonstrate their social impact and their corporate responsibility. So we think that all these that I briefly present, all these bullets, may be interesting to develop further and to write on about, to think about. And that's it, I finished. So there is time for the discussion. Thank you, everybody.